and you'll see the live in the top left-hand corner.
Great. Thanks so much, Dominique. I appreciate your help.
All right, you're ready to go.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Environmental Commission. Today's June 8th, 2021, and we will start with roll call. Beth, can you hold on? I think you have this on your slide, right?
Not my job.
No, but can you go to the next slide? Okay, thank
Here we go.
Kristen Mole, Kira Abraham Pani,
Here.
Mariana Del Valle, Laura Murphy,
Here.
Timothy Randazzo,
Here.
Chelsea 2.
Here, present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum, and we'll continue with public comment. If there's any members of the public wishing to address the committee on items that are not on the agenda, you can do so now for up to 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record. Dominique, do we have anybody here?
No, public have indicated they wish to make public comment at this time.
Thank you. We'll move on to approval of minutes. Our last meeting was on May 11th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes or questions or clarifications on the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
A second.
All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Let's if everybody can, sorry, no, that's fine. Let's try just raising our hands with the raise hand function.
And for a virtual meeting, a roll call vote is required. Would you like me to call the roll call vote?
Sure, that'd be helpful. Sorry, I didn't know that.
No, it's okay. Committee member Randazzo.
Aye.
Committee member 2.
Aye.
Committee member Abraham Pani. Kira.
Afraid we can't hear you, Kira.
I'll come back to her. Committee member Murphy.
Aye.
And Chair Rake.
Aye.
Okay. And
the minutes approve if we want, even without Kira's response.
yeah, the motion did pass unanimously. It looks like Kira may have gotten disconnected.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, moving on to business items. The first item is to review the EC budget request. As you know, at our last meeting, we sort of had a bit of a last minute change to our budget request, and that was presented to council over the last month. And it was approved. Beth, I don't know if you want to walk us through the slides that you developed, or I can talk.
Yeah, I'll do that. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yes.
For now. So yeah, first draft budget meeting was on May 18th, and we discussed this at our last meeting when City Manager Malin joined and said, you might as well ask for what you want now. So we asked for $167,000 with $120 intended to be used towards looking into and beginning climate action plan or sustainability plan, 30,000 towards a consultant related to the PIP4, and then some more money related to what Chelsea specifically requested and has been working on with Timothy for a community event. So that meeting happened, and there was some concern with committee being allocated that much money, and then also still the next step of needing to have any of that spending in turn approved by the council. So the next meeting came around on June 2nd, and Craig split it up a bit different. And I've highlighted some things. So if we actually start on the bottom slide, that will address what you want to see related to the 167 that we initially requested. So those on the bottom image, starting with HR staff survey, if you go down a couple, you see CHED, which is Community Housing and Economic Development, Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. That was thrown into the budget of that department versus with the EC budget. And then right below that is the plastic ordinance, small business support at 30,000. The other two items kind of speak to elements of what was sent in the letter that was provided to the city manager, council, and the HR director that Chelsea started and other people contributed to. So we received an email back from the city manager. I shared that with you, his response to that letter, but these are also two funding items related to kind of internal recruitment, hiring, and a staff survey. Now, if we jump up to the first image, you'll see Broadway events, 20,000 each for Park and Recs, Public Works, and then again, Community Housing and Economic Development for a total of $60,000. This is where I see the potential of still our subcommittee that Chelsea and Timothy are working on to have some of that money towards an event, but also in collaboration with those other two listed departments. Public Works would be commonly used for setting up and taking down events on Broadway. And then the Park and Rec department is in charge of getting most special events approved, like the car show events on Broadway and things at parks. Also worth noting is two funding items below that for International Day and Wailagetsa Day at 12,500. And then the Environmental Committee budget got bumped up to 2,500. So this was what they looked at last time at a special meeting on June 2nd. And if there's any questions, I'll take them now.
I'll open it up to the commission members first if there's any questions.
I have a quick comment. Thank you for that great presentation, Beth. I did follow up with the city manager on clarifying whether a part of the 60,000 that's recommended to be appropriated in the draft budget for Broadway events could be for the community fair idea that we've been discussing here. So I'm just waiting to hear back for that clarification.
Okay, and I think part of that too, in seeing that essentially the budget requested by the EC is put into essentially the department I work for, is that when the new director starts, that we be in communication with her about what we've been working on and how essentially the budget of her department is going to be used in part by the Environmental Commission.
It's really helpful. I have another question, but I wanted to see if others wanted to speak first.
Yeah, also worth noting, the very bottom underlined, the public work budget to support 2 community-wide cleanups feeds into what we'll talk about later with what we are proposing with the litter ordinance amendments, and then also public works match for FOSPA, Friends of Seaside Parks Association, for ice plant removal and park improvements at 25,000.
I have questions, but Chelsea, you can finish your questions first.
Thanks. I just wanted to see if Beth or anyone else might be able to help clarify numbers here and versus in the initial draft budget, where I believe in explaining the EC's request for the total of $167,000 budget on different things that we've been talking about, that fund would essentially be funded by funding from the American Rescue Plan. And then now with the update, is that still the funding source that we're looking for in order to get funding, which is kind of a, I guess in my mind, sort of a contingency basis, even though I understand it's almost certain that we get that money. And, or is with the June 2nd kind of updated draft budget, is the city taking a different approach? And this may be a question for the city manager. It's pretty technical.
Feel free to ask him when he gets back to you, but my recollection of this, and anybody who was tuned in, feel free to correct me if I'm misrepresenting what was done. This is part of just the core city budget, and I don't think that the Rescue Plan Act funds were discussed during these budget talks. It was mentioned as something that will be coming, but I don't think anything in the current budget was dependent on that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question and a comment. Beth, my question is for you. Do you know where in the process we are in the hiring for a new community development person, whoever we'd be working with on implementing the projects that are going to essentially be in her budget?
Offers have been made. Start dates I'm not certain of, but Dominique, you might chime in if you're aware of more and can share potential start dates.
They haven't given us the official announcement on what that will be as of yet.
Okay.
The goal was June 15th. I don't know how close or far we are from that actual date.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, just that it's, that the position has, or the job has been offered, and that's where we are in the process, instead of, still having to go out and recruit and things like that. So that's helpful to know that it's a little bit further along.
So just to further clarify, what the budget did show is that there will be 2 assistant city manager positions. One is specific to community development. And then there's also going to be a 3rd position, assistant to the city manager, that's specific to economic development. And then I think the 3rd assistant city manager, or 2nd assistant city manager position, is just kind of a generalized position without any specialization in economic development, community housing. And those were all from the one posting advertisement that they did for assistant city manager.
So if I can just clarify, so when it says this, the CHED, there's actually 3 positions: a community position, an economic position, and then like a general assistant.
There will be assistant city manager, which is essentially quote unquote community development director. Also reporting in that org unit will be assistant to the city manager, economic development. And then the 2nd assistant city manager position, I believe, is going to be in the city manager's office, not in this department.
Okay. I'm going to be gonna have to work with those positions, I think, to really understand exactly how the roles and responsibilities will all tease out and how we'll be working with each one. So Dominique or Beth, I'll probably follow your lead on that.
Yeah, I think the titles might be a bit confusing, but essentially the position that was formerly held by Gloria Stearns will be filled with the assistant city manager director position, and the position that was once held by Kurt Overmeyer was downgraded to manager level instead of director level. So that will be the assistant to the city manager economic development position.
Okay.
In case you ever found yourself engaging with those previous staff persons.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes. Okay. And then the other comment that I had is just sort of in regards to something we'll probably get to later on in the agenda during our commission updates. Because I'm guessing Chelsea and Timothy have an update on the event. So just want to keep this in mind as we reflect on previous discussions when we get to that point about partnerships and collaboration opportunities versus new separate events. Because this, to me, looking at this budget sort of speaks to great opportunities for collaboration. So I'll comment on that now, but we can dig more into that when we get to the commission updates and hear more about the work that the subgroup has been doing on the event. Any other questions or comments from the group on the budget on this item? Any questions or comments from the public?
Members of the public, if you would like to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if you're calling in from a phone. Chair, there are no members of the public that have indicated they wish to speak for public comment on this item.
Thank you. Before we move on, I just want to say I'm always confused on, I thought we had gotten, I don't know if upgrade is the right word, but that we were now referred to as a commission and not a committee. But everywhere I see it within like the website and this budget, we're still referred to as a committee. Can we get clarification on if we're a commission or a committee? And if we are a commission, can we start using that formally?
We are a commission. I think it's just a matter of consistency. I also saw an old org chart that referred to the environmental committee. So there's documents scattered across the city that other departments use for their work. And unfortunately, they have not all been updated, but we'll see what we can do to have consistency in that.
Okay. Thanks. All right, moving on to the PIP4 update and the food truck amendment. Beth, I think this is you again.
Part of it is, so just an
I
update
can
on,
talk through this slide. I
okay,
didn't know it was
go
for-
for it.
Okay, so well, Beth and I actually both put a similar slide together. So just wanted to share and get us all sort of clear on what was happening with the different amendments related to materials. So the 8.60 is the priority impact plastic pollution prevention policy, also known as PIP4. And that is a ordinance that has been completely rewritten. That's sort of the core piece that we've been working on and talking about for the last few years. The draft, as we know, is finalized. It's ready to go to council. I think they were waiting to get this food truck ordinance that Beth is about to talk about to discuss sort of cleared, and then they'd move on to this. So my hope is that it's coming in the next couple of months, but I've said that before multiple months ago, so we'll see. The second ordinance is the single-use carryout on bags. And so that's 8.62. That was updated for consistency with the rewritten PIP4. And then 8.28 was updated for consistency also. However, we did also add a section in there on collection of litter and debris from parking lots and sidewalks around businesses. So that was a new addition to that 8.28. And we've been discussing, Beth and I have been discussing just sort of how to move these forward. And we've talked about it a bit as a commission too. And that's just to move forward the 8.60 and the 8.28 together. The 8.62, I'm sorry, the 8.60 and the 8.28 will move forward together. I hope I said that correct. And then the 8.62, we haven't really made a firm decision on. And then the other thing to consider is back in January or February, I think, I can't remember exactly when, but City Council received a presentation on SB 1383. And in that presentation, the consultant who was doing the work or doing the speaking mentioned that he would be sort of coming back to the commission or to the council to help update ordinances to reflect what would be needed for 1383, and that would be happening sometime in June or July. That's been pushed back to third quarter. And Beth and I have both been in contact with the gentleman who is working on that and invited him to the commission or to our commission meeting. And he wasn't able to come tonight, but he should be coming at a future meeting. So we can discuss more about that. My concern when I first heard the presentation from council was that we'd passed this ordinance, this 8.60, the PIP 4, and then have to turn around and amend it right again to make sure that it was compliant with 1383. So my hope is that we can discuss with him prior to PIP 4 moving forward to make sure that what we have is consistent. And my inclination tells me that it is. In the big ways, there might just be small changes that we have to take, but we'll wait to hear more from him. And Beth shared our draft amendment so that he could review it and sort of do that analysis and give us some feedback. So that's one outstanding item. Does anybody have any questions on any of these? Or comments? Cool. Beth, do you want to talk about the food truck? And then I'll take public comment on the item after that.
Okay. I sent this out, I think, yesterday and was hoping you would review it. We're coming forward with amendments creating a new chapter for food trucks because in February, the city passed an emergency moratorium banning all new food trucks and then extended that in April for additional time. And almost everything is ready to go for the July 1st meeting. And because I took a lot of what we included in the PIP 4, including definitions, into this section of the draft amendments for food trucks, it's essentially requiring sustainable business practices of the food trucks, similar to, if not exactly, as we would require for brick and mortar restaurants as outlined in the PIP 4. So I shared it more so just to see if there was any additional input or thought specific to the operations of a food truck. I do believe I have another page where it does talk about litter pickup every couple of hours or prior to a roaming food vendor leaving a site where customers were served. So if you have any input on this, I'll take it now. Otherwise, kind of the idea with including it here is that as a council priority, this coming through and landing on our plates should include sustainable business practices / PIP 4 type elements before that code moves forward. Otherwise, there will be, 30 to 60 day gap in between the two policies. And I couldn't reference a policy that doesn't exist in this code. So duplicating some language and efforts, but I think it's interesting to potentially incorporate sustainable business practices in other code sections where applicable, or even as conditions of approval on some projects. So it's interesting to think about how this could have that type of impact. And I think that's about it on my end. I'll take questions.
Kira? I can't hear you. No, you're still on mute.
That's because I was muted. Is this okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Okay. Thank you, Beth, for coordinating across ordinances and ensuring that we wouldn't have to go back and backfill the policy. My only concern about this one was the piece about doing the litter pickup every 2 hours. I wonder if we would need to be more specific to ensure that that doesn't violate health code, because the food trucks I've observed tend to have 2 workers. And if they're both handling food, now my dog's barking at someone, so I'll wrap up. If they're both handling food, then we might have issues, just to ensure food safety.
Okay, I'll check in on that. I think Monterey has something similar in their permit requirements. So I have a contact over there and I'll see how they've handled that.
Chelsea?
Thank you. I just wanted to see if Beth or Lacey or others could walk me through the draft amendments on the previous slide on number 1 and 3. What is the substantive difference between the two? And I know that obviously point 3 talks about no mobile food vendors, etc. explicitly, but I guess I don't really see the substantive difference between the 2 points.
From my point of view, what one is saying is that you're talking about the products that are actually used as associated with the food. And then the third one is related to how you're given that food in a bag, package, etc., to take it away.
Does that make
I
sense?
think I see some great overlaps between the 2 points, and if there's a reason to consolidate those 2 points, I think that might be a more streamlined way to propose these amendments without changing the substance.
I'll look into that. Thank you.
Beth, I just had one thing I wanted to make sure that I was clear on, and then a quick question. But overall, I'm frankly just super grateful to you for taking the thoughtful approach of ensuring that this ordinance complied with what we know is going to be forthcoming. Like it's less work for us, hopefully less work for you in the long run, but I just really appreciate that foresight. So thanks a lot.
Also to add, because I didn't put it on the slide, but it was in the email, I think, there's a handful of definitions added, which of course were drafted at the time of the PIP4 creation. So those are also included. So everything you see here has a definition for the most part.
This last line of the first bullet, the non-plastic single-use products shall be allowed only if they are currently accepted for recycling.
Mm.
The designated waste hauler. Does that, when I first read that, I thought it differed from our policy because we don't want plastic even if it is recyclable.
Yeah, when I saw that there, I thought I had a memory of us putting that there. It was in the PIP4. That's where I grabbed it from. If it's not there, then yeah, that's something that we need to talk about so we can check in and see what it says tomorrow.
Okay, I can go back and look at it if you want.
Yeah, go for it. I had a memory of us talking potentially about how some businesses are pretty much doing everything opposite of what PIP4 asked for, and it might have been like a way for people to ease in to the transition, but that's my memory, and I don't know how accurate that is.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go back and try to recall, because frankly, after the last 3 years of conversations on PIP4, takes me a moment to get my thoughts together around the different aspects that we've discussed. So I'll go back and take a look and see if it helps jog my memory and get back to you.
Kara, do you have any memory on that?
Yes. Well, I'm not as concerned because it says non-plastic items that are not recyclable. So I was more concerned about ensuring that we didn't prohibit, people don't think we're prohibiting compostable. So I think it should say non-plastic items that are not recyclable or compostable.
All right, thanks. Yeah, Lacey, let's check in on the consistency with PIP 4 on that one and see if we need a small tweak.
Okay. I see Chelsea and then Laura. Chelsea, go ahead. I can't hear you.
Apologies. I have a process question. Are we being requested to approve these amendments, or are we in discussion only?
Discussion only.
Okay. And then in discussion on things like these amendments, do we need to post the amendments on our website as part of the agenda?
This is not a complete version of the amendments. This is just one small section of a handful of pages. And since you're not making any action on this tonight, nor will you be, just to clarify, it's in Title 10, which is essentially everything in the public right of way. So when we move this forward to City Council on July 1st, typically amendments to codes in Title 17, which is zoning, go to Planning Commission. This won't be going to Planning Commission. It will be going directly to Council. And it will be a citywide effect. So yes, when the agenda packet is published, it will include the draft ordinance and the exhibits and attachments.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Laura.
I just wanted to chime into the conversation you're musing about the non-plastic single-use products line. Kira had started to clarify because she emphasized that this was non-plastic. It sounded like you were concerned about potentially plastic single-use if they were recyclable, but this specifies that that's included. I think that this was for items like aluminum foil that might wrap a burrito or a taco or a paper boat, or, well, that would be compostable, but things along those lines. So I just wanted to bring that up from my memory.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I might have been like not reading it accurately or reading it too fast, because I think that it says the non-plastic single-use products. So that kind of clarifies that.
Yeah, but again, if I can just add, I think we really need to clarify that that we're not talking about, that we are not prohibiting compostables because PLA plastics are still plastic. We can workshop it. I think just a simple edit will take care of it.
Okay. The other thing that I was thinking about, this is going to council on July 1st, if it would be beneficial for me on behalf of the commission, or just me, I mean, or we can approve it electronically before our next meeting, I guess, but just to write a letter of support for this and express its consistency with the ordinance that we've been working on for the last 3 years. I think that might be helpful for council. But I don't know if anyone else has an opinion on that.
I agree.
Thanks, Kira. Yay. Okay. I'll work with Beth on putting something together, and if we want it to be on behalf of the commission, or I can just do it as a public, person, not on behalf of the whole group. Okay, any other comments on the food truck amendment update? And any comments from the public on either PIP 4 or the food truck on this item B?
Members of the public, if you want to make public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if you're calling in from a phone. Chair, there are no members of the public that have indicated they wish to make comments on this item.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 5C, which is subcommittee updates. I can really quickly say the plastics committee does not have an update. So we'll move on to the habitat and to the economic development. Laura or Chelsea, would any of you like to go first? Laura.
Hi. So frankly, I find it difficult to differentiate between subcommittee update and reports from commissioners for my part. Our subcommittee on habitat, we had a brief conversation between Kristen and Beth and I, an email exchange shortly after our last meeting, but for the most part, I have been carrying on with liaising with Parks and Rec Commission, as well as with community groups, Sustainable Seaside and Friends of Seaside Parks Association. And basically same things going on as the last report that I had given. FOSPA is continuing to have their Saturday park work days from 10 until 12 every Saturday. And that is being shared on multiple platforms. I did receive an email as though I had been added to a city listserv about the park work days, but when I went to follow that link, it seemed to have disappeared. And so I'm not sure if that was experimental or who initiated that, whether that had come from maybe from Public Works or from the Parks and Rec Commission. It wasn't active when I tried to follow it. But it did lead me to where I could sign up for updates. I am from boards and commissions, for example, but I'm diverging from the topic. So FOSPA will be having a meeting tomorrow evening together with Public Works folks and discussing their priorities in FOSPA parks. And so I'll be attending that meeting tomorrow evening. I'll also be attending FOSPA and Parks and Rec meetings this month, which will be on the 28th. A lot of just positive momentum and activity, still incredible volunteer turnout for these work days. I, for my part, liaising with FOSPA and Sustainable Seaside as well, really promoting removal of invasive species and replacement with native, drought-tolerant, and pollinator-friendly plant species. So that is the narrative I'm carrying forth. Sustainable Seaside will be supporting an event this weekend on Sunday, which is put on by Palenque Arts at Laguna Grande Park. And I wanted to just bring that up. It's from noon to 3:30. That's an event where, one of our sustainability partners is helping to sponsor that event, but it might be something for us to pay attention to, stay connected to in terms of observing and promoting sustainable practices as these public events are happening more and more in our fine city. I think that's just about it for me.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions for Laura before we move on to Chelsea?
I did forget to mention we got the proclamation in for Pollinator Week, in case you hadn't heard it. So it will be Pollinator Week coming up the week of June 21st through 27th. And that is the week that we will be at Lincoln Cunningham Park for our Pollinator Work Day.
Is it June 21st?
That's correct. 21st through 27th.
Thank you. Chelsea, would you like to provide an update on behalf of your subcommittee?
Absolutely, and feel free to chime in, Timothy. Yeah, so we've been focusing mostly on budget requests, and so thankful that with the updated draft budget, it looks like there's some funding from the city. It's budgeting for different types of events. We've also followed up with a few folks. We talked last time in EC about potentially partnering with different departments or connecting the Seaside Community Fair idea with existing events. And so, and I think as a threshold matter is seeing if any events are actually being scheduled in person in our time, as cities and the state are returning to more in-person gathering. So I guess I'll just then provide an update in reverse order. I think that so far I've learned from Dan, Parks and Rec director, that there are no in-person gatherings or events being scheduled at this point, and only one Parks and Rec is looking at is the Blues in the Park event. So that could be forthcoming sometime in the fall. We followed up with Dan, and I'm waiting to hear back to see if it's possible to kind of tack on the community, at least the first pilot of the community fair with Blues in the Park. And I think with where I've heard Blues in the Park is located, that's pretty much where we're thinking about locating the community fair if it is, if it does move forward. I apologize.
Train's coming.
Yeah, I'm getting a phone call from my partner about dinner plans. As one would during this time, right? So I, hopefully, I think this, with more events being scheduled in person, funding allocated. I have to mute my phone again. Thanks for your patience, everybody.
No problem.
That I'm hopeful that with the commission's approval and the council's approval for the community fair event, that it could be combined with something like Blues in the Park or another compatible event. And so that's kind of where we are right now in the planning. And I don't know, if this is, I think because I did not request a specific action item on this for the EC's approval of the community fair, and in time, so it wasn't reflected on the agenda. So if that's something that that's an action item that I need to request, or Timothy would need to request, and then I can do that for our next meeting. I'd love to see if anybody has any questions or want to circle back or follow up on things that I haven't addressed.
Am I muted? Yeah, I think that I think it would be helpful to place it on the agenda as an action item and to provide some sort of a more formal presentation or ideas around what the proposal is. If you're at that point. If you're not at that point and you're still, sort of thinking through what this may be, or if there's too many things up in the air, then I think we can leave it as a discussion, and I'm happy to go into more of a discussion now if you'd like. But if there, when you get to the point of having a formal project or event that you'd like to have us approve formally, then we can add that as an action item.
That's a good idea, to put together a presentation. We have a lot of notes and figures, and I know Beth has a wealth of knowledge from the city's past farmers markets events and a lot of lists of vendors. So I think everything we've been talking about is there and well documented. And yeah, I'd be happy to put together a presentation to the EC for the next meeting. And I think that because we've talked about this idea for, I think the last 3 meetings, if I could request an action item
Mhm.
for EC approval of the community fair, starting with hopefully being able to combine it with another event and piggybacking off of it, you know, at the beginning as a pilot. That would be helpful.
Okay. Yep, we can add that as an item for next month. Is there anything that you would want to discuss now that would help inform you on putting together your ideas or thoughts before then?
I'd love to hear from any other commissioners or staff, just to see if there are major concerns or opposition to the community fair idea as a whole, and then see if if there are, how we can address those and try to work together and move forward. I mean, I haven't heard anything, but I just want to make sure that we're creating something new that we're inclusive of what everybody's thinking and hopefully address all of your concerns.
I'll open it up to commission members first. Go ahead, Laura.
I think that I'm just interested to see at this point, I'm presented for consideration all of the elements that you are intending to include in terms of activities and community partners that are represented and those types of things. If I can see it on paper and think it over as a proposal more, then I'll be better prepared to, I guess, make commentary. Otherwise, I don't at this moment have any major concerns, so I'm looking forward to that presentation. Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I have, just a comment that I have is to really sort of define what we mean by collaboration or partnership with existing event. I think it could, to me, there's sort of a spectrum, and it could be, that we have our own tables and we get sustainability related folks to sort of come to an existing event. So let's just say it's Blues in the Park, because that's one event that the city is having. As we sort of ease back into public events, it could be, on one end, like we're as much a presence as the music and the traditional items there at Blues in the Park by tabling and stuff, but it just happens to be at the same time. Or it could be the other end of the spectrum that might be something more like we work with the people who are the planners and organizers for Blues in the Park and the food truck vendors that might be there to ensure they're complying with hopefully this new ordinance. We maybe staff the waste stations to help people sort their materials, or we, request volunteers. And so it's much more embedded in that organization versus sort of a tandem event. So that's something that I would really like a lot of clarity on. And I'll just be forthright right now that I prefer the latter, like the integration. But I'll just leave it at that and wait for a more formal presentation next week as you gather all your thoughts and reflect on the conversations that we've had over the last couple of meetings.
Thank you.
Okay. Any public comment? This is on any of the updates from the subcommittees?
Okay, members of the public, if you wish to make public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 if you're calling in from a phone. Chair, there are no members of the public that have indicated they wish to make comment on this item.
Thank you, Dominique. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which are reports from commissioners. Like Laura said, this might be redundant from the previous item, but are there any commissioners that want to provide updates on any items? The only thing that I wanted to touch on was the letter that we sent. So we sent the letter that Chelsea drafted and that was also initiated by Mariana at our last email. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for taking the lead on drafting that initial letter. Really appreciate the thought and research and work that you put into that. It was really, really great. And to the commission for responding to emails and such to help us get that letter approved in order to submit it in time. I got the response from Craig, which Beth shared with you all, and I think it's all fair comments. I do think, we haven't heard anything back from any council members or from HR who the letter was also shared with, and I don't know that we will. But if we want to reflect a bit on the response from Craig, and I didn't feel comfortable responding just on my behalf since the letter came from the whole commission, but some of the thoughts that I had in reflection of that letter was, really thinking about specifically regarding the staff positions. So we talked about creating 2 new staff positions. And I think the response he shared is a pretty common response, and that is we don't need these as their own separate positions. We need them to be embedded into all of the roles of all city staff. I've heard that before. That's not a new comment. I think what we would want to ensure happens, if that is the case, is that there are specific steps that then hold people accountable, right? So it's really easy to say it's everybody's responsibility, but how is that being supported in a day-to-day sort of job duty and functions manner? An example that I have specifically from the sustainability, but this also holds true for a DEI position, is how are these topics embedded into performance evaluations? If there is an expectation that all employees sort of consider aspects of diversity and inclusion and sustainability, what sort of professional development trainings are offered? How are managers supported and trained to ensure that the people that may report to them are integrating these topics into their work? So I think, that's a potential follow-up or response, is just to ask for clarification on how that could happen, and to offer ourselves as a commission to help support the city. I mean, I definitely don't want us to be, shaking our finger at city staff and saying you should do this and you should do this, but really I see ourselves as sort of part of city staff, and we're working with everybody else to ensure that these topics are integrated in a day-to-day functionality sort of manner. And I think when we look at the demographic data that was shared, it gets a little tricky in small organizations to share demographic data because it can be really easy to have that demographic data be identifiable. So I don't know how they can split some of that information, but it might be interesting to look at, breaking that up into manager level positions, versus non sort of management or executive level positions and things like that. So those were just some thoughts that I had after reviewing Craig's response, and I wanted to hear from the rest of you on if you had any thoughts, if you thought it would be worthy of a joint follow-up, or if we just take note of the response.
Hi, back in my house, hopefully with more reliable audio. Lacey, I've heard the same response that Craig gave us, and I agree. It's not surprising, the idea that equity work and sustainability would be integrated throughout. I share your questions about follow-up, you know, and trying to just learn a bit more about how that will be integrated. Essentially, yes, it's everybody's job, but who is coordinating and holding them accountable for that? I know I'm just repeating what you said there. As a committee, I think Chelsea and the other folks who worked on the letter did a good job clarifying that, you know, we are the environmental committee and equity issues intersect with environmental issues. That said, I do want to be sensitive to our scope. And I think the questions about how the city plans to integrate sustainability across staff is maybe a stronger starting point, because that is our mission. And I think we have really relevant and immediately necessary questions like, okay, when the city, you know, when the city is fill in the blank, you know, doing city things, how do we make sure that they are doing it in the most environmentally sustainable ways? What are your check marks? When it comes to equity, I do wonder if we might have this conversation with others who might be asking the same questions. I don't know if the homeless committee is still meeting, and if so, whether they might have raised some of the same questions. I think equity is our purview, but it is not our purview alone. And so I just want to be sensitive to both making it known that that is very important to us, but as the Environmental Commission, we don't necessarily need to you know, fully grill the city for their equity integration. I think it's more like we are curious, and we would like to work with others who are asking these same questions.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Kira. Other thoughts from commission members? Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Just to chime in, because I think that keeping a conversation going is helpful, and appreciate Lacey and Kira about what both of you had said. I think that a response makes sense to bring to some kind of resolution and to continue the conversation if we're not feeling entirely satisfied with the response that we received. So I do think that we should respond, and very much along the lines of what Kira was suggesting, definitely focusing on metrics maybe of how sustainability programming will in fact be integrated into city staff and programming as a whole, so that if it does come to us to any degree, we can point to something for accountability.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to share comments or thoughts? Okay, then I'll maybe just draft a response and share it with the commission to review. And then we can do it electronically like we did last time. It'll be shorter, and I'll take into account the comments of Kira and Laura and give you all a chance to respond electronically as well. So that was my only report. So Beth, do you have anything?
I don't.
Okay. Well, thank you all. We will adjourn our meeting. Our next meeting, I wrote it down so I would know this time, because will be next month. It's July 13th. So I will see you all in about a month. Until then, enjoy your summer, enjoy your 4th of July, and thank you so much for all that you do. This meeting is adjourned.